Hi guys, welcome to Film Files. My name is Sid, and today I'm going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 3. This movie was both a good movie and a bad movie. They had Rocket have his backstory in this film, and he was in a separate tangent than every other character. For me, the biggest note on this film was that it was extremely overwritten. It was very by the book writing. There were setups throughout the first half of the movie and payoffs throughout the second half of the movie. For example, when they set up Rocket with his three friends in the cages, the second they set that up and they made them likable and they called them friends, right away we know, okay, they're going to kill these three characters. They're just trying to get the audience emotionally invested in these characters. And that's writing 101. And same with when the nameless, faceless army of the bad guy infiltrates into the other ship. That was clearly a setup for this Arrow to kill all of them and for that character to have his big character moment. The second they break into that ship, we know what's going to happen. That's basically what they were setting up. Even Adam Warlock, a secondary character in this film, who makes appearances throughout the course of the film but doesn't really change the story or the plot in any way. It felt like a character introduction for future films. It was just a setup of his character. The two films that I saw within this film, one was the story of Rocket the Raccoon, which was very interesting compared to the other half of the story, which was very forced. It was not that interesting. It felt like the characters had to go on a quest because there was a movie, so they had to go on a quest. None of that felt organic. None of that felt realistic, or the choices the characters were making just felt like, oh, this has to happen at this point of time, so it's going to happen at this point of time. It didn't really flow as a story, but Rocket's story kind of was flowing as a story. And even though they set that up, that the other three friends of Rocket were going to die, it was still set up beautifully. The scenes were done really well. Rocket and his three friends in those cages is a very, very dark, creepy scene. I'm surprised that they went this dark in a kids' film. I can appreciate that they did. I have a feeling they didn't know how dark it was going to turn out before they actually did it, because you have these animals that are being experimented upon. You have them torn apart with limbs being fitted into their bodies, metallic limbs being fitted into their bodies, and all of that stuff you would usually avoid in a children's film. But well, kudos to them for doing that. There was a lot of story elements in this film that were just placed there for the sake of having a story in the film. The only good choice that I thought this film was making was the death of Peter Quill, but they took that back right away and they decided, oh, that was just going to be a setup for Adam Warlock to have his big character moment. And it felt like every single thing was a setup for somebody to have their moment, and the entire film itself was a setup so that they could have Rocket the Raccoon take over the Guardians. So this entire film felt like a setup for Rocket the Raccoon and to move away from the Star-Lord Peter Quill character. And the way they did that was very strange, where they just had Star-Lord say, hey, I'm out, I'm done, I'm bored of this, and he just moved on. They could have done that significantly better and could have done it like true to his character, but they didn't really want to do that, I think, because they didn't want to give him any more importance, and they wanted to focus this entire film on Rocket the Raccoon. It's hard to comment on a film which is not really a film, but it is a setup to 10 other films, and it is also a payoff to the previous films. And they did a bunch of fan service on this one, and they wanted to end on a high note, so the ending felt quite forced. The worst part of this film was the villain. The villain felt very generic. He was written very generic, and the acting was very generic. It just felt like, oh, a bad guy with some bad motivations, which are not really clear, but he's just going to do bad things so that the heroes have someone to go up against. They could have done this villain significantly better, because the way they tied him into Rocket's story is actually interesting. He is extremely tied into Rocket's origin story, and we could have kind of seen the story go from his perspective, but they just pulled Rocket out of commission for a majority of the film. Instead of having Rocket lead the story, convincing the rest of the Guardians that they need to really take on this villain, and then them going on this journey, that would have been a lot more organic. But rather, they were decided, okay, we're going to put Rocket out of commission, and then we're going to have the Guardians go up against this bad guy to save Rocket. And even how they find out that they need to go up against this guy to save him is very forced. There was a kill switch. If there's a kill switch, why didn't he just kill him remotely? It doesn't make any sense. The writing is overwritten, but at the same time underwritten. It's very confusing. It's a messy film. I think it would be fun for audiences who are a fan of the Marvel Universe, but if you're walking in, it's not really going to make much sense. If you're walking off the street and you're not familiar with the 100 Marvel movies that came before this, you're not really going to connect with this because it doesn't really work as an individual film. It is a mess of ideas from various films and a mess to set up various more films. It feels like the writers are tired at this point. They're following a lot of the Marvel formulas, especially with tone. They completely followed the Marvel formula with the tone of the film. They throw in a joke, there are a bunch of jokes in there, and have a bunch of action in there, and really pull back on the story because nobody's really focused on that. So I was very disappointed with this film, but also I went in not expecting much. So I guess from what I expected, I was still disappointed with what this film delivered. Overall, maybe a 3 or a 2 out of 5, and you can watch it if you're bored, but you don't really have to watch this film. Guys, do you want to go ahead and hit that like and subscribe buttons right there? I'm sure you can find it. Can you find it? Cool, thank you.